Come on in, sit back, relax, and listen to episode 131 of the Wealth Tech Today podcast. I'm your host, Greg Iskowitz, founder of Ezra Group Consulting. This podcast features interviews, news, and analysis on the trends and best practices around wealth management technology. In today's episode, we're trying something new. We're doing a recap of the latest webinar in our Data as an Asset series, which started last year. So we're calling this the start of season 2. We launched these webinars because we saw a need for more information about how enterprise wealth management firms can better manage, organize, and analyze their data. That's also why Ezra Group launched our data assessment service to conduct an in-depth review of data sources, downstream consumers, data utilization analysis for enterprise wealth management firms, and deliver a comprehensive strategy and roadmap to get your data architecture under control. For more information on Ezra Group's data assessment service, go to ezragroupllc.com. And a couple of quick housekeeping notes before we continue. Please subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss an episode. Make sure to check out our sponsor, the Invest in Others Charitable Foundation at investinothers.org. And now let's kick this thing off. Welcome to our recap from our recent webinar, which is called The Tower of Babel, Consolidating Wealth Management Data from Multiple Sources. And I'm your host, Greg Iskowitz. And on this recap, we've got my partner in crime here, Jeff Marsden, Head of Product from Xtiva Financial. Hey, Jeff.
Hey, Greg. Glad we're doing this.
I'm glad we're doing this. This is fun. This is like football, right? After the football game, the announcers do a recap of the game, talk about things they liked and didn't like. We're going to do the same thing on this webinar. And this webinar was one of a series. We started this last year, doing these data-focused webinars about the engines driving wealth management, about client experience, all kinds of interesting stuff. So this was cool, talking about consolidating data. And we had a great panel. It was Rich Romano from FidX, Mike Stern from Riskalyze, and Todd Winship from Temenos. So all these guys really know their stuff. It was hard to get a word in edgewise.
It was a great start to our second season.
Exactly, season 2.
Yeah.
We'll drop all the seasons so you can binge watch our webinar.
Exactly. I like the football reference. I feel like I need a telestrator though, and a little bit, and take the camera out to the tailgating and decide who's got the best snacks.
We're going to do that in post-production. We're going to add that on top of you. So just move your hand and we'll show something being written on the screen.
Awesome.
All right, so before we start, we both picked some of the things that we liked, some of the questions and topics that were covered in the webinar. But before we do, I want to throw out a statistic, because I love statistics. A study by IBM found that poor data quality costs the U.S. economy over $3 trillion a year due to lower productivity, outages, higher maintenance costs, only to name a few of the bad outcomes. And consolidating data from multiple sources, one of the biggest issues is cleaning your data, getting it clean, getting it accurate, reconning, and that's something we talk about constantly, work with our clients constantly. I know you guys at Xtiva work with your clients constantly on cleaning their data.
It's pretty important for us and our clients, because we're making compensation and performance management decisions, with them or on their behalf, and that's hard to do well with noisy or dirty data.
So let's get through, let's switch to the questions here and talk about some of the highlights from this event. So I'm going to go first. And one of the things we talked about were I think it was either Todd or Rich was saying that basically all vendors in our space, and probably in many spaces that are similar, are both givers and takers of data. They both generate data and they consume data. Now the givers and takers, that's different than the psychological use of those terms where takers are self-focused and givers are others-focused, as a psychologist would say. But it's more of, I'm generating a lot of data that other firms can use or my client's going to use, and I'm pulling data from many sources. It could be dozens of sources that my clients use.
Yeah, so true. You think back maybe 15 years, and I think the data path was much more linear. There was a there was a smaller number of sources or a single source, and the data sort of flowed through that sort of natural back end to front end of the experience, and ultimately out to out somewhere. And today that's just not the case. It's a much more complicated and interconnected landscape, which puts a lot of pressure on the need to figure out how to get the data that's valuable, and in a complete and orderly fashion from one place to another, and recognize that isn't a linear flow. It's a bit more of a web. It's a web of data movement today, because something that might be created that's valuable in Riskalyze or valuable in Xtiva might benefit something else in that ecosystem that is adjacent to, or even back sort of up the food chain, or back down the food chain.
That's true, and we're seeing a lot more data analytics being used, and you look at a lot of firms now are hiring or assigning senior executives who just handle data and analytics, like Todd Winship over at Temenos. That's his title, head of data and analytics. And in order to do analytics, you need data. So we're working with a number of firms that are building out analytics tools into their systems that didn't have them before, whether they're just wealth platforms or other parts of the ecosystem, realizing that they're generating a lot of data that can be analyzed and can be presented to their clients to help them manage their businesses better, help them optimize their processes. Are you seeing something similar?
100%. I mean, we see roles created at our clients that's related to data, or more commonly thinking about how to get more value out of the data beyond simple transactional operational processes, but enriching the customer experience, getting more leverage out of staff in the front office or the middle office, using that information to advance and think through the product and service roadmap. So they're constantly in a state of having data in a high frequency availability to optimize decisions around how they go to market, or how they optimize even things as simple as pricing of products, or other attributes of how a product or service is offered.
Yeah, we're also seeing data being generated in other areas, like operational areas, whether it's research or practice management. They're all generating data that can be analyzed and leveraged in providing value. Whether you're looking at the business, because if you can't measure something, it's hard to manage it well. It's impossible to optimize it if you can't measure it. So being able to capture all the data is something that a lot of firms are building out tools to do that where they didn't have them before. And they're also prioritizing the data for their clients based on expected business value. So don't just show them everything and let the clients try to figure it out, but help them figure out what data is most important. And one of the things we recommend for some of our larger clients, where they've got tens of thousands of advisors or even 100,000 advisors on their platform, is show us what other people are doing. We do the Google of our space, and you can see what other advisors are looking at, what other firms, broker dealers or large RIAs, what they are interacting with, which reports they like the most, and bubble those up to us. Don't make us wade through all this mounds and mounds of data to figure out what we need.
Yeah, crowdsource what's valuable in many respects. We've noted, and we've enhanced our capabilities, but we've noted a desire for context. Whether you're a senior executive or a financial advisor, when you're given access to a dashboard, or you're directed to some analytics or a report that's asking you to make some conclusions, that there's an evident change in how individuals now look at that information and say, how do I get more context to understand this better? And I think it's an interesting push-pull dynamic, because the amount of information that now can be added to that analytics to provide context around it is fueling a desire for more context.
Yep, is that a negative feedback loop, or is that a positive feedback loop?
Let's call it a positive feedback loop.
It makes more sense positive. I think it's negative where it makes it worse the more it goes, but
Yeah.
either way. Okay.
I think you're probably right in a technical sense. I just kind of prefer the positive word.
I agree. All right. So next topic. This one was I think I picked this one too. So we've seen a shift in the industry over time. I mean, since I've been in here 30, I've been in financial services over 30 years, and wealth management for 17. And we've seen the industry slowly shift from 100% batch processing, overnight files, shipping critical data via FTP, now to more API connections and streaming data. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, one, I think that's 100% true. It's certainly changed a lot. We had some discussion with the panel on this topic, and I think there was some compelling description of some compelling challenges that are a result from a desire for higher frequency information and some challenges in getting access to a complete set of high frequency information. There's no doubt, there's no question that the market wants more information at a higher frequency. I'm not always convinced that you need to have it at the frequency that the desire exists for. I'm not sure there's enough change sometimes on, sort of between a completeness date, but there's no doubt that people want information at a very high frequency. And the technical landscape is evolving to support that as well. So the ability to do that persists or exists, but it makes the debt that exists in old systems that have daily or weekly run processes, it makes that debt a bigger burden on the business when you're able to move data or create valuable data at a high frequency, real time, or multiple times during the day, and you want to drive decisions or business processes off that, and you're encumbered by information that's necessary to drive the process that still runs on a daily batch, or worse yet, a weekly or semi-weekly completeness process.
This question generated a lot of discussion on the panel. This was, I think, went on for about 15 minutes. Just the panel amongst themselves. I didn't have to say anything because there's so much to talk about. And there were two new words generated that came up in this question. Was one, you mentioned trustability of data. That's a new word for the wealth management industry. And Rich asked the question, when you're looking at your data, you want to know what's commoditizable.
Yeah. Well, we should make sure we let the folks at Oxford know that we've got a couple of new entrants.
Words. Another part of the shifts when we're seeing shifting from static processing to more dynamic and streaming processing was the question on, you still need to have a good data dictionary. You still need to standardize your data. Rich was asking, what's an account number? Just asking that question can give you multiple answers.
Well, Craig put it in very specifically in the wealth management context, and our conversation sort of cut across banking, wealth, and insurance. But very specifically, if I just think about it from a wealth management perspective, we have customers. We have 95 financial service relationships at Xtiva, and we have some customers where there could be six or seven sources that have unique rep codes for the same human in them. So, Rich's point about account numbers is bang on. Like an account number, across multiple sources, try to match that up to a client, then to a household. Well, we still wrestle with a fundamental issue related to reps, which is, there's different ways of identifying reps, financial advisors in different source systems, and that's a challenge for how you supervise them. It's a challenge for how you manage them. It's a challenge for how you compensate them. It's a challenge for it's a challenge for how you connect them together into teams of advisors. It's a solvable problem. We have a solve for it at Xtiva, but it's evident of the challenges that are exacerbated by more and more sources at play.
I'm going to throw out another stat here. According to a Deloitte survey, 86% of respondents have increased their spending in data and analytics over the past 3 years. That's a lot. And I think everyone sees the value here. So there's no secret that you need to be able to understand your data, be able to manage your data if you're expected to remain competitive. All right, so next question. This is yours. You picked this one out. We asked the panel about householding. What does householding mean to your firm? Why did you pick that question?
I just find householding to be a really interesting case study in some of the challenges of trustability, to bring that word back to the table. But it's a very interesting. It's a specific piece of data. If you ask somebody what a household is, there'll be lots of different perspective on how you would define it, and it would depend on who you're speaking to and what their role is. But our customers, your customers, might have 3, 4, 5 different householdings for different purposes. There might be one for statement consolidation. There might be one for customer relationship management. There might be one for fee billing. There might be one for financial planning. There could be a variety of different householdings, and so that seems like a pretty simple piece of data. Well, a household name, a household key, some unique identifier of a household. But now you've got 4 that I've just enumerated, and those households will change over time. Households are created and destroyed. How do you do reliable longitudinal analysis? It's a single example of the complexity of bringing full data perspective to the table that allows firms to really understand in a reliable, data-driven way what their business looks like, what the topography of the business is, and how is it changing. And the solve for that isn't easy.
And what we see, some of these things can be solved with grouping, simple grouping, like we're just going to group these accounts or these people, if you're going by social security number, we're going to group them for billing. We're going to group them for reporting. But it gets more complicated when you're doing things like models. So if you're saying, well, I want to assign this model to a household, well, then a household may have 5 individuals and they may have 30 accounts. I mean, my family, we have 5 individuals and we have close to 30 accounts, and it's not, we're far from wealthy. It's just, you have multiple jobs. You wind up with a bunch of rollover IRAs. You've got IRAs for things for the kids, and 529 plans, and joint accounts, and single accounts, and taxable, non-taxable. So it winds up being very complicated. So in order to do a household model, if you're applying one model across a household, the software's got to be able to figure out with a rules-based engine where you can store, what the location of certain assets are, where the best place to put them is, what the best tax, how to reduce the tax consequences, and how to keep manage drift in the model all at the same time.
Absolutely. And how do you balance the needs of the enterprise to understand households for the purposes of reasonable operational processes or compliance processes with the needs of the advisor and the advisor team to manage the customer or the household, the collection of clients in the household in the way that they have built their service model? There's 2 very distinct needs that themselves.
That is true. All right, moving on to the next. I'm trying to keep everything to 5 minutes. So 5 minutes per recap question here.
All right.
I'll keep us on target. So we're on target. And so next one was a question that I picked. So we asked the panel, what is integration by design, and how does it help an enterprise wealth management platform handle new types of data delivery mechanisms, such as streaming data or the other types of delivery of data? And I thought one of the keys was we go back to the sources of truth. What's your golden source? What's your silver source? And in order to do that, you need to understand where your data is coming from. But more importantly, what integration by design means from my point of view, I come from a computer science point of view, from a software building, that you need to be flexible in your design, because you're assuming that our company is going to buy up another company. We're going to be integrating. We're going to be merging other systems, and if our software isn't able to integrate with other tools easily, and without even knowing what those tools might be or what that data might be, but keeping it flexible, then we're going to have problems down the road when let's say we're an order management system and now we have to integrate a billing system. Well, how do we do that? We don't even understand that data, and our system is very closed.
It was Todd, I think, at Temenos was talking about integration by design. That was a very thoughtful way of articulating having the data strategy or the means of accessing and availing data for the purposes of whether a back office, middle office, or front office purpose, whatever that is, the decision and the approach to doing it, to make it deliberate, to basically build it into the strategy of the product or the service, not to it just be an adjacency or a must-have because you just need you have to have it to FTP some data from point A to point B. No, they talk about it in a very deliberate way about how they focus on that as part of their product design and customer strategy. I think at Xtiva we have a similar philosophy. It's probably not quite as fully formed as Temenos would need to be about it, but we call it Xtiva Connect, and it's basically a philosophy that our integration team follows and relies on some technical capabilities to be as thoughtful and deliberate as possible about how we onboard data and how we make the utility of data available through the ecosystem as efficiently as possible. Your point from a few minutes ago, though, about a common data dictionary or common understanding of what that data looks like is critical to any of those things being successful.
It's all about having a strategy.
Yeah.
The way I look at it, when you're building software, what's your strategy? Don't just build, well, we need these, here's the features we need, let's just build it. Well, what's the strategy? Where are you going with it? Do you expect it to scale? Do you expect it to integrate? Do you expect it to be robust? Do you expect it to be accurate? These are what we call non-functional requirements that have to be considered when you're building software. And you mentioned the data.
Maybe a shout out to season 1, Craig, because we had a lot of talk about data strategy in season 1.
Yeah, throw a quick plug. If you want to, you can go back and listen, or rather watch the video recordings of our previous webinars, season 1, as we're calling it, of the Data as an Asset webinar series on our website, EzraGroupLLC.com. And if you look for the webinars, do a search for webinars, you'll find it, and you can register for them. You have to register one at a time, but then you'll get a link, a private link, that you can then watch them at your leisure. And we also did blog posts. So if you go to our blog and you search for the webinars, Data as an Asset, you'll find some quick summaries of some of the key talking points. So if you like to listen or like to read about it, we support you both ways.
A little nighttime reading and a little car driving.
Yeah, I mean, I drive a lot, and I listen to podcasts all the time. It's just
me too.
Straight. It's just so you get a lot done. And although the one thing I find with podcasts, not to get off topic, is it's hard to take notes. Like I want to remember what I listened to, but by the time I got there, I'd forgotten half of what. Yeah. So we need some like an Alexa or Siri for podcast notes where I can just stop it and say, oh, remember this, remember the last bit, just clip it and pull it out of the podcast and put it into a note for me. But
Apple added this thing in the recently where you can like report if there's an accident or report there's a speed trap or whatever, and it's pretty easy. It's like 2 taps on the screen and it's done. I want the same thing for podcasts, so I can like just tag that thing. I don't even need to make the note of what it was. I just want to know that these 6 spots in the 45-minute podcast, I want to go back and listen to it, easily find it, trigger the memory.
Another good idea. They were generating a lot of good ideas. All right, so let's get on. We can do our separate innovation podcast later. All right, so we just did integration by design. We're still on target. Next one is pain points. Oh, we kind of talked about this, Ray. One of the pain points we were talking about was, how do you know which data, where to get the data from? That's back to the golden source. We don't need to cover that again, but let's talk about data expiration, right? Knowing the timing of the data. And that was an issue when you've got 25 data sources. It's not enough to just be able to handle them, incorporate them, and store them. You got to know, how do I build a view of my client if I've got 25 data sources and they're all coming in at different times of the day, week, or month?
Absolutely. And how long can I rely on a piece of information? And and can I rely on that piece of information for that duration in any context, or only in certain contexts? It's no wonder that our customers are adding folks with responsibility for getting value out of data and managing the quality of it in a truly front office data as an asset kind of way, because those are critical aspects to doing that successfully, is being able to have confidence in when data is going to be past its best before date.
This is part of our data assessment that we do at Ezra Group, is building a data dictionary. And part of the data dictionary is not only what each field means, because a lot of times the people who made the system don't live there, don't work there anymore. If it's an in-house system, and we don't know why no one remembers why we created a certain field, or they've reused a field, which we call a kludge, right? They reused a field that was just available for something else, and the data you see in the field doesn't mean what you think it means.
Yeah.
Or we don't know how long, as you mentioned, how long is that data good for? And that should be another field. This data has to be refreshed every week, every month, every year. Whatever that data, whatever that frequency is, that's got to be captured.
You probably would encounter when you're doing that work, the important distinction of, I use the gold, silver, bronze notion of source. There's other ways of describing that hierarchy, but the notion of being clear about, there's an assumption that gold is better than silver or bronze. It's generally the case, but not always. Sometimes there's an improvement downstream that's valuable for a specific purpose, maybe not generally across all purposes. But you must encounter a lot of need to really crack into the nuance of gold, silver, bronze sourcing, and how it influences those trust factors, that best before date factor, the full context of what that particular data element is.
Yeah, and sometimes it gets some heated discussions. And the reason why we do that is because in an emergency or in a crisis, you don't want to have to go figure out, well, what's the backup for this piece of data? We're not getting it anymore. The data feed that was providing it is down. Now what do we do? You don't want to have to decide then, well, pull that data. Well, we don't, you want to do it when cooler heads will prevail and when you've got time to consider. And that way you build it into your data dictionary or your data mart. Here's each source, and here's each data field, and here's the sources we're getting it from, and here's the 1, 2, 3 primary, secondary, tertiary, gold and silver, bronze, whatever you want to call them, but define them in advance so it's easy for the customer support team, the data operations team, to know exactly what the backup is, where to get it from, how to provide it, how to deliver it, so the clients don't see anything. That's the goal.
Yeah.
You want it seamless to the clients. They don't know that the data has changed, or that something's gone down.
Yeah, you want to avoid as much as possible the law of unforeseen consequences rearing its head. And well, I don't think this is exactly a black and white rule. I do think that the closer you are to bronze, the more likely that the law of unforeseen consequences is going to pay you a visit.
Yes, that is true. And you really can't avoid unforeseen consequences, but you can try to mitigate your risk, right?
Bang on.
So last, we have time for one more. So let's talk about our favorite topic that comes up in a lot of our panels, data lakes. It's time for data lakes. It's always a heated discussion. It's always an interesting, it's almost not heated. It's a lively conversation between our panelists, no matter who it is, no matter where they come from. When we mention data lakes, everyone's got an opinion. What's yours?
It is. I think we've had our best sound bites when it comes to things related to data lakes. And I think maybe we're going to spend a little bit of time in one of our sessions later this season talking about them maybe in a little bit more detail. But sorry, I lost my sound for a moment. But absolutely, they come up. They're an interesting debate. I think there's a lot of difference of opinion about what they're meant to do and what they can solve. But one observation I would share, from our conversations with customers, our webinar series is there is an awakening to data lakes not being nirvana. And that Todd made some articulate points today about how to approaching data lakes not as nirvana, but a piece of the puzzle in your data strategy. Not to avoid them, but to see them as a piece of the solution, not the solution.
Absolutely. That's something almost every one of our panelists on any one of our events has talked about, is that you want to know why you're doing it. Why are you putting this data lake in? What's your reason? But that's similar to almost any piece of technology. You don't want to just throw it in, any piece of an enterprise technology, right? It's different than just, well, I want to add an app on my phone. If you're bringing something like a data lake, you need to know why you're doing it. You want to understand the ramifications. You want to know what data it's good to hold and what data it's not good to hold, right? Why you use a data warehouse versus a data mart versus a data lake.
I look at them as I generally try to look at them from the perspective of them being a pretty positive indicator of the fact that the market customer, our customers, the market, your customers are becoming much more focused on data as an asset, to their data strategy. And so, lakes seemed like a reasonable way to start to get your data collected up, to put it somewhere where you knew you were going to be able to do something with it in the future, even if you didn't have the whole strategy sorted out. I'm generally, with our panelists that we should be careful not to drown in our lakes, but there's a positive there, which is it reflects the importance that this marketplace is putting on getting data into the hands of decision makers that allows them to make good, smart, contextual decisions that improve the velocity of the business.
And one thing I want to throw out that data lakes can have errors, can be inconsistent, cannot be structured properly, or can be not be reliable because they're not built properly. And it's prevalent, and I like to get more into the technical aspects of things. So anybody listening, if you're CIO, CTO, and you're an Azure client, you'll know this term. They have a term called a delta lake, like alpha, beta, gamma, delta lake, which is an open source storage layer that sits on top of multiple data lakes to ensure their reliability. And it works with other Microsoft technologies. But what's nice about it is we've been talking about different ways of delivering data. And, these firms, whether it's Amazon, Google, Microsoft, or any of these other cloud providers, realize that different types of data require different technologies to manage. So I know Azure has something called an event hub that's for streaming data, to ingest streaming data. They have, what's it called? Azure Databricks, which is for batch data ingestion, or maybe it's called Azure Data Factory, or I can't remember. And then you've got your extracted, transformed data can be loaded into the Delta Lake layer. So it gets really complicated, but it's the point I'm trying to make is a data lake isn't the be all end all. You need to realize that it needs to be reliable. You need to be able to use the tools that are available to handle different types of data delivery mechanisms so that your data doesn't get corrupted, that it can be managed and support whatever downstream systems you want.
100%. And every one of those cloud providers has, their own version of those tools. So, as long as you're on the cloud journey, you're going to be able to access those tools on a managed service basis and make some terrific progress with your data strategy.
Yes, you will. And that's the end of our recap, man. We're out of time. This was a great discussion. I think that the webinar which we recorded earlier today, was a fantastic discussion. It cut across wealth management, banking, insurance, and really tied everything together. And I was thinking with our season 1, season 2 of all these webinar events that they're like free classes you can take for a mini MBA in data analysis and management, specifically to our industry. So go back and listen to them. You'll be able to go to our website, EzraGroupLLC.com, and register for this. The private link isn't available yet. It'll probably take a couple days for it to get there, but you can register still. And when the private link is posted, you'll get an email with it as well. So thanks for listening. We appreciate your time, everyone. And remember to go to our website, EzraGroupLLC.com, and sign up for our newsletter. It's on the homepage at the bottom. Once a month, you'll get an email chock full of wealth management goodness, analysis, news, links, and other information. You will not regret it. So thanks for listening. Talk to you all again next time.